Shashank, thank you for being back on the program.
Well, thanks for having me again. I appreciate that.
Absolutely a pleasure. So, what's happened in the past year of artificial intelligence? Can you take us through some very important events in the AI industry in 2023 alone?
Yeah, 2023, I think, has been one of the most remarkable years in the last, I would say, decade as far as AI goes. Of course, AI advancements been happening behind the scenes for a long time, for a decade and more. In fact, all of this started way back, multiple decades ago when the quest for bringing sort of a smart machine and the whole concept of artificial intelligence was coined. But then, as every technology, sort of every technology goes through its cycles. It goes through its boom phase, it goes through its rapid adoption, and then people start getting, sort of cautious about it, or they start getting pessimistic about it because it doesn't deliver to the promise that they were hoping for. And I think that AI kind of went through its own motions over the last few years, but then last year in particular, 2022, was an interesting inflection point, and that really was triggered by ChatGPT because it was almost a new incarnation of a conversational bot that sounded lot smarter, lot better, lot human-like, as opposed to anything else that we had seen prior to it. So certainly, I think that caught the masses' attention, and everyone started thinking about AI and talking about AI, and it spread very rapidly across consumer apps to enterprise apps to lots of active research. And I think that that really led to, I would say, like, that was probably the trigger. That was the starting point, but that really led to some really cool stuff. Lots of good innovation. Lots of newer things come up very rapidly in less than 12 months. From open source to other proprietary models, to large models, to small models, to types of applications, to multimodal type of, sort of innovation where you were not only looking at text, but now you were going across videos and voice. And so just overall, there's super progress, rapid progress in 2023. Now, of course, we could parse that even further and say, well, what is the big significant quantum jump there? I think that the quantum jump isn't AGI, as much as people would want to think about it. I think that's more of a buzzword that has caught everyone's fancy, and unfortunately, OpenAI and its own fiasco also kind of brought that back into light, right? Like that became quite a drama, almost a soap opera of its own kind. But in reality, if you think about it, I think we are still way far away from AGI. That's at least my deep understanding of the subject, and just working in that space, that we were nowhere close to it, right? Forget general intelligence. I think even specialized intelligence, if there's such a thing, that can be human-like and that can learn quickly, is something that we haven't really created yet, or we haven't really fully understood or fully conceived yet. Now, having said that, while that is the big goal, I think there has been, as I mentioned, substantial advancement, lots and lots of advancement. The machine has become much smarter. The concept of language and then using language to really understand meaning has gone quite a distance. And the fun stuff is there is lots of that all around us. So there's plenty of models, plenty of applications to play with this year, which I think that everybody should try and get their hands on. So.
So, if we're not getting closer to AGI, which I agree with you, I don't think ChatGPT or Bard are getting us closer to general intelligence in a machine. And ChatGPT is still this inflection point for the masses. So then why is the AI industry so hot right now? What represents this innovation? If there was a singularity in 2022, to use that word loosely, but we're
Right.
not getting to general intelligence, then why should we be excited? What specifically has happened?
Yeah, it's a great question actually. It's a very pertinent, thought-provoking question that, what exactly happened? Why is it so big as opposed to everything else that has happened, before it? Well, I think there are a couple of nuances to this that I do feel that have really made the big difference. One is the fact that I think the conversational interface per se is something that folks had actually sort of given up on over the last few years. If you go back in time, the concept of chatting with a machine, or the concept of conversing with a machine, has been a romantic aspiration for machine learning and artificial intelligence scientists for a very long time, right? Like even 2, 3 decades ago, and even prior to that, certain forms of bots or certain forms of these, smart conversational interfaces have emerged. And then, of course, after that, we've seen a whole bunch of those come through in rule-based type systems in our day-to-day lives, right? Like every time you contact somebody to get some help, a customer service agent or a customer service bot kind of pops up and starts the conversation. But most of them have been anything but smart. In fact, most of them have been fairly inaccurate. Um, they are no way human-like. In many cases, they're actually fairly annoying because they don't even follow simple instructions. So I think there has been in a way an understanding from the side of the users and humans at large that these bots are a you know are a gone cause. I don't think these can be saved anymore. These are just going to become worse, and they're not going to be really helpful. So I think like that was one. I would say a common agreement, if you may, or common understanding that we had all come upon through our different experiences, through our different lousy experiences, if you may. Um, but I think ChatGPT suddenly sounded intelligible. So it did sound smarter than what one had seen in the recent past. It did feel like you were talking to a human. Whether you were talking to a human or not is a different, question altogether. But it did sound human. It did feel like it was somebody across the wire, who was actually listening to what you were saying and, telling you something that was meaningful. So I think like that definitely hit a chord. That is something certainly that the world woke up to and said, "Well, wait, wait, wait. So far the bots were like, no good. And what happened? Why is this making sense?" And right, and you did start seeing that in the initial era of ChatGPT when it was released. Everybody would share their experiences with a sense of awe. It's like, oh my God, I asked the bot to give me some suggestions for the next vacation. It actually made sense. It told me something that I could really act upon. Or, I asked it a few questions and it responded in a way that, an expert would. So I think there was certainly that feeling of, the intelligible machine, if you may, or something human-like that, that came through. So I think like that got people excited and that got people curious, right? And when I say people, I think all types of people, from researchers on one end to users on the other, to everyone else in the middle. And while people who are deeper in the technology were certainly looking at this underlying technology, the transformer technology, and have been looking at applications in natural language, I think at some level this was, the classic sort of inflection point of the blade where then it could go up the hockey stick, if you may. So I think that was one bit, the big aha moment. The second part was the fact that at some level, any technology plateaus, if you may, right? And so there's substantial advancement, there is rapid advancement. Everybody starts, getting excited about it, and then there's that period of lull. There is a period of plateauing where somehow no new research comes through. We almost keep spinning our wheels in place, where it's like, yeah, we've gotten so far, but we don't know how to get any further. And there is almost, sort of a loss of interest, if you may. And I think that happened a little bit with the prior generation of AI. If you look at the prior generation of AI, and again, AI is a very loosely defined term. In fact, a lot of people may not even have the same definition. If you ask a bunch of people what AI is, like 5 people, and you might get 15 answers. Um, but if you start looking at the last more popular or commonly understood meaning of AI, it was a lot more about this, smart machine learning engine that was finding patterns, that was detecting things, that was trying to read through a large amount of data and find the noise or find the signal in the noise, right? So like it had become more of that, and that got overused and abused to an extent. And so there was this question then that popped up, well, what better can it do? How much further can it go, right? And so when ChatGPT came around and we started seeing the emergence of the new large language models, right, as a whole sort of class of tooling, or the class of models are, um, there was new promise. There was just completely new promise that was brought to surface, and I think that got folks excited. And then last but not the least, it went beyond text. Everyone's having fun generating images and doing all those fun creative things. And I think fun sometimes is the right ingredient to get people excited, right? And then they start taking interest and start asking questions and start figuring out, where else can this go? How far can this go? Right? What else can I do with it? So I think it was um, it was timely, and it was I think just answering the questions that had become frustration points over the last few years. And so I think like that's, in my opinion, at least hit the chord more than anything else. I don't think there was a quantum jump in research, or we had this, completely new concept that we discovered that we had never ever heard of before. None of that really happened, but I think it's more the application and usage and relatedness to this innovation that was going on behind the scenes that brought it front and center.
You use an interesting word. You used plateau. I'd like to revisit that. So one thing that I've been toying with in my mind is, have we hit the iPhone moment for AI, or has AI become the iPhone? So if I could just expound on that. So going back to what you were saying before, uh, so many technologies are in AI. So there wasn't this quantum leap, but they were just piled together and compiled together and made accessible through a very, user-friendly chat interface. And so we can, kind of analogize this to the iPhone, where all the technologies existed before, but they were just put together in a very, delicious package. But now we're seeing the iPhone go from a 0 to 1 technology, to use Peter Thiel's term, to a 1 to N technology. The iPhone is looking the same as before, and we're not really seeing those quantum leaps year on end. So are we going to experience further quantum leaps in AI? Like, is this the 2007, 2008 iPhone moment where the next 5, 10 years are going to be massive and it's going to change and everybody's going to be excited for the next year? And we're going to be looking for OpenAI's Dev Day every single year, like we look forward to WWDC? Or is it going to be like, ChatGPT or GPT-4 was kind of 8 GPT 3.5 stacked together, so it wasn't really an exponential leap. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question and a good comparison. Well, there are two conflicting thoughts here, and of course, we'll see how the future evolves, right? We haven't seen that yet, so we'll learn as it sort of unfolds. But I think that if you were to just draw comparisons or step back and look at what we have learned so far from other technological innovations, at one level, I could argue that I think the current generation of AI advancement, or what is possible with AI, might be bigger than the iPhone moment. It might be more like the internet moment or the radio moment or the TV moment that has occurred to us as a society, right? Where there were substantial impact, substantial behavioral changes, and unfolding over multiple decades, right? Like you could argue that the internet is still evolving, right? And it has come through over the last 2+ decades, and it has become very pervasive. It's very much part of everyone's lives. In fact, we won't know what we could do without the internet, right? It's become difficult to be without it. So I think it could become like that, where AI is sort of, embedded and inside everything, every single phase of our lives is impacted positively and in multiple ways through the emergence of this newer AI technologies, and I think that promise, I'm a believer in that school of thought. I do feel that I think that possibility is upon us and it's going to happen. And, as we walk into 2030 and 2040 and 2050 over the next, 2, 3 decades, I think we will see that realization come through, like that would become more and more real, and it would spawn off in more and more different ways that, can't even conceive of today, right? So I think like that is definitely happening, 100%. That is definitely on the cards. Now, more in terms of a specific technology, whether this is the iPhone moment, because the way I think about the iPhone moment, and again, just looking at this more from someone who has lived this technological innovation through multiple cycles, that we do talk about the iPhone moment, where the iPhone moment was preceded by the BlackBerry moment, and the BlackBerry moment was
Mhm.
preceded by the Palm moment, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth, right? And each one at the time felt like this was a generational technology, that this would change the way that we think. Somehow it didn't quite make it, but iPhone did, right? But in a way, I think the world was getting readier to be wowed by the iPhone moment, by those prior moments, if you may. They had gone through those cycles where they had, started thinking about what you could do with something in your pocket, right? That is more than just making a phone call, right? Of course, earlier it was more about address books and, exchanging contacts and writing tiny notes. That has transformed into a full-fledged computer in your pocket, right? And so, certainly, I think that if you were to look at that sort of an access or that mental model, I would say that I think we are probably not at the iPhone moment, and it may not exactly be like the iPhone moment, because see, the
Mhm.
iPhone moment, for better or for worse, was very much controlled. At least the narrative at that point in time was certainly controlled by one company, which is Apple, and then of course, others joined in with the Android revolution. So they almost became two factions, the two worlds, if you may, right? And then the emergence and adoption that happened with the two worlds sort of competing with each other over the years, right? The Android and the iOS. And of course, iOS had its more tighter integration. Android had its more, the free open philosophy that allowed for, multiple vendors to kind of build things on top of it, right? So I don't think OpenAI is the Apple, fortunately, unfortunately, of this AI generation. There is a lot of kudos to OpenAI. I think OpenAI has done a lot of excellent things. Um, and certainly congratulations to them, for building what they have built. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be talking about these things if, the chat GPT and, all their prior GPT version moments hadn't really happened, and we weren't walking into GPT 4, 5, etc. Um, but the reality is that I think there's a lot more happening outside of the candle that OpenAI has lit. So they got everybody excited, but now you see not only the big tech, if you may, or the bigger FANG companies come up with their own initiatives. There's of course Google doubling down with its own background with Bard and then Gemini, and a lot more that we will see. And then you have, of course, the open source rapid adoption that is happening across board by multiple sets of companies, and also Meta playing a big role in that with their Llama 2 models, and that whole series of effort that they're making. And then combine that with, the 50,000 other models that are sort of either already out there or being built as we speak. So I think the innovation moment would be quite rapid, would be quite widespread, like the internet moment, if you may, where people will come at this space from different dimensions. Some will build better large language models. Some will go down building better adversarial networks. Some would end up building more multimodal, like focused more on videos or image generation or voice or so on and so forth. Some would go more deeper path of finding meaning, in the sense that those that will reason through more smart ways. Some others will look at more applications and how it can get embedded into the world of enterprise or consumer apps. And then some others will look at efficiency, right, which might lead to its own innovation, which is already happening, where you could say, hey, large language models are actually expensive to run. So how about small models? What can a small model do, right? And so they could end up becoming a lot of these different pieces, if you may, that will come together, and then we'll have this fantastic universe of, sort of next set of innovation. So that's at least how I view it, which, to answer your question, sorry for sort of rambling through it and giving you
Okay.
a roundabout answer here, but I think the reality is that we might see a bit of both. We might see the bigger moment, like the internet moment, on one side. And then on the other side, I think we won't have this single, one single iPhone moment type of a story, but there's a lot more coming. And so you'll
Mhm.
see a series of those in
Right.
different forms and shapes.
No, it's beautifully put. I mean, it does make sense looking back at past kind of techno cycles, if you will, the Palm and the BlackBerry, which were before my time, but since you brought them up, I can confidently speak to them. They were priming our civilization for the iPhone moment, and the iPhone
Right.
was kind of the confluence of all of these, factors and aspects of technology that, brought about kind of what we're doing right now. Because this is recorded on an iPhone. So In 2024, what should we expect? Will the iPhone moment happen for AI, and will it be large language models? Will it be from the open source community? Is it going to be a multi-model approach? Like, what are your speculations? And also, what kind of companies are you looking at and looking at closely? Are there any projects where you think, oh, that's really interesting? So please take it away.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, well, firstly, yes, I do think 2024 is going to be super exciting. It already is. Every month, every day, there's just so much happening in the world of language models, I would say, largely large or small, or others associated with it. Um, that is difficult to keep pace with. There's just newer models pops up every morning. A newer theory that's coming up. Um, so I do feel that I think that'll only accelerate. You'll see a lot more of that come through. I do feel that I think we will see this rapid acceleration with again, minor plateauing because, if we don't see substantial jump, we might start questioning and then it would go and accelerate again. In some sense, you could almost think of the next stages that you're going to see 2024, 25, 26, and so on and so forth over the next 5, 7 years is kind of step functions. We'll go very rapidly to the next step. We might wait there a tiny bit because we don't know we've come to the right place, everything is coming through together. It might be too expensive, it might be inefficient, or whatever the reason for that little pause may be, and then we'll accelerate again. So, yes, I think 2024 would be this rapid rise to the next couple of steps for sure. And I think it'll only pave the way for further step up in 2025, 26. So I think there's plenty of that going to happen. I don't think there's any sitting back, right? Like we have plenty more coming. In terms of companies and projects, personally, I am very intrigued by, some of the more recent developments that have happened. And there are, in fact, four that I can call out, four separate developments. Which I think is very interesting in terms of wanting to understand where we could go. Right, one still doesn't know where we will go. We'll figure that out. That's what 2024 will teach us. Perhaps next year, if we sat like this, we will be able to answer that question more confidently. How far we came. But I think today, just looking forward and just speculating, I think there are at least four things that I'm observing from more bottoms up approach that have a very profound impact that perhaps hasn't really made it through or bubbled up all the way yet. So one of them is, of course, the evolution of large language models themselves, right? And so when I say the large language model evolution, I think there is a lot of now conversation around we might have exhausted all the organic real text out there. And so what else can we bring in into the fold, right? And there is a lot of talk about bringing in multimedia of different shapes, forms, sizes. If you were to start looking at some researchers in this space, they're quite bullish on bringing in more images. In fact, there's a whole debate going on that is language the right representation for learning, or is language the right representation for knowledge? What about all the visual and sound related learnings that humans do? Shouldn't we also try to replicate that or at least learn from it and bring that to the artificial intelligent platform or system that we're building, right? And there's an element of truth and there's an element of intrigue out there in, that particular question, if you may, because that's true. A young child doesn't necessarily know all the vocabulary or the difficult parts of the word, but is able to very quickly perceive and look and learn, right? And you could also take the case of animals where they're quite smart in certain kinds of activities, but they don't necessarily speak a structured language. At least we don't know about it, right? And so you could argue that language itself is not representation alone, but yes, visual media, sound, what we see in terms of images, motion in terms of videos is what we should try and feed in as the inputs into our language models. And more interesting things will come out of it. There's already some of that happening. There's a lot of work underway, but I think there is going to be a lot more discovery in that realm. So that's an interesting one to kind of look at, right? Like going beyond the words, if you may, going beyond the language, right? Now, of course, there's still language where you have to cover a lot more surface, where you have to still cover a ton of surface in terms of not just the multilingual, but also context, right? There's a very nice, interesting blog that Werner Vogel, CTO of Amazon, put out there that we are talking about multilingual, like, speaking in Japanese or speaking or asking a question in Arabic or asking a question in French or asking something in Spanish and getting a response as opposed to just English. But there's also another aspect of it which we are not thinking of in terms of language models is the cultural nuance aspect, right? So if you ask somebody, what would you like to drink? The answer to that or the suggestion to that could be very different. A simple question depending on which part of the world you are in, what time of the day you are in, what is your cultural context, right? So something, a simple answer like that could be very, very confusing and could be actually very deep, right, from a human understanding standpoint, which doesn't seem deep at all as humans. Like, yeah, that makes sense. It's the morning. Obviously, I'm not going to consume, the whiskey or the beer in the morning, but, I'm going to go for the tea, or maybe you would. I don't know, right? So, but nonetheless, I'm saying like you got to be in that mood. You're right. If I'm on my vacation in Hawaii, sure, I could have a margarita in the morning, right? Like it's cool. But if I'm going to work in some place and I have a meeting, perhaps not, right? So I'm just saying, like, these are all cultural nuances, contextual nuances that need to be baked in, right, into this understanding, and then you can add more to it. So anyway, so that's one big part of the puzzle in terms of evolution of large language models itself, and the different kind of inputs that we'll see being brought in into the mix. So that's one. The second important big movement that is happening, which I think is again worth taking note of, is this whole concept of smaller models. So a lot of the smaller innovators and computer scientists and engineers are very much, I would say, troubled by the fact that you need humongous amounts of resources, and in particular GPU resources, to run anything that's meaningful, especially when it comes to large language models. And I can speak from personal experience. It's both cumbersome, complex, expensive, right? Like all of those things are true. And then given the scarcity of GPUs, which hopefully would get better over a period of time, there's also a massive amounts of just feasibility for anyone. Even if you had the money or the resources, do you have all the other pieces of the puzzle? Do you have the underlying infrastructure to really, even run those large language models, or even experiment with them, right? So there is this whole sort of, I would say, reality-driven pushback from the community. And so the community had started innovating for that reason and for other reasons on smaller models, right? Like, can smaller models do better? And I think that smaller models are now becoming very successful. So in the past, one had questioned the efficacy and the amount of intelligence that can be baked into a smaller model. But the current success that we're seeing out of even Microsoft's Spy 2, or a more interesting one, which is a mixture of experts model, as it's called, the MOE model that Mixtral brought out from Mistral. Some of these are doing very well. In fact, they are competing very well with, or outperforming in some cases, in specialized cases, some of the other larger models. So, there is definitely a movement now, or at least enthusiasm around smaller models, right? And so I think we're going to see more of that. And smaller models might also lead, or, pave its path towards specialized models, models that would be able to answer, say, medical questions with confidence, but may not be able to help you make your decision with, your entertainment choices. Or there might be a model that might be an expert when it comes to financial decisions or cybersecurity, or food business or something like that, as opposed to it being, a general purpose intelligent model. So I think we'll certainly see these specialized and mixture of model type of techniques and more that would come up. Now, for those who are in the field, mixture of models, again, as it happens, is a sort of I would say, a realization of an idea that has existed in the past. It's an ensemble learning model where you have, multiple models kind of coming together at the same time. Now, if you look at the third one, the third particular picture is around the whole concept of going beyond transformers. So if you start looking at all the models today, the small, the large, the open AI ones, the Gemini ones, just about everything else, the Llama, like what have you, out there, all of them have taken inspiration from this very foundational concept of transformers and encoder decoder models. So at the end of the day, if you were to think of all of them as a family tree, and you were to think of the lineage, they all belong to the transformer species. right? So if you start thinking about it, they've all kind of evolved from it. Of course, they've come a long distance, but that's where the roots are at. Um, Now, there are some newer ones. For example, there is this interesting model called Hyena that has been launched by Together AI. That is one of the first few non-transformer based, completely new type of a model that is also fairly efficient and effective, and is looking at this concept of language-based learning, but not using the transformer encoder decoder models, but using a different kind of concept. So I think like that's another piece that you will end up seeing becoming very, very real, that people will start uh, going outside their primary sort of, the one successful path of transformer only type models, and, start exploring some newer realm. So that's the the third bit. And then last but not the least, which I think is equally important, is that I think that so far it has been very much focused on essentially some ways to replace search, right? Like if you really think about it, I think the big shift or the big user-centric approach has been that, hey, I need to go and have an intent and, start looking for stuff on the internet and piece it together. Well, I should just go ask a question. And so if I ask a question, somebody basically gives me cooked food as opposed to ingredients, and now I got to chop them and fry them and eat them, right? So I think like there is that difference of, give me what I need and, give me in the form that I can consume right away. What we are still not talking about, which I think some of it is now emerging in academia and research, and this is still going on, is like, hey, how about the real thinking machine? How about the machine actually helping me make decisions, not by just providing me, the information, but actually doing the work for me. Like I ask the machine to go do, complete a certain task, and as the task unfolds, there will be decision points and causal reasoning and cause effect type of deduction that needs to be made, which humans do. Like if you ask me to complete some things, like, hey, can you help me with something so and so, or I asked you, you would go, and then the rest of the pieces you would figure out. And along the way, you might have to make a few different decisions and even decide on what other information you might need to bring into the fold, and whether this is something that would actually complete the task or not, and it's something that, we would all be happy and satisfied about or not, right? So like all of those kinds of logical, emotional, behavioral, contextual, decision making, and bringing that together is something, I think, how the world works, not just that you keep chatting away to your solutions all day long, right? You have to like kind of just get things done, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. And I do feel that I think we will evolve, which is already happening, from a chat conversational based understanding of AI to a more agent based or a more true human like understanding of AI, where you'll basically ask the AI to go accomplish the task, or the AI platform to go accomplish the task, and it would go and get the task done, right? So I do feel that I think there are these four different vectors where there is some outstanding stuff going on at the moment, right? The more inputs in the large language models, the emergence of smaller models and expert models, and then the emergence of alternatives to this family tree of transformers, and then last but not the least, transitioning from chatbots to smart agents. So,
Sure.
and all of this will unfold in very big ways in 2024.
What are the ramifications for education? So, just touching on the last point, because I want to get to open source because it's really fun talking to an AI expert like yourself. Just there's so much to discuss, but specifically around education. So, ChatGPT Singularity in November of 2022, we had schools in New York almost immediately banning it from the classroom, and some schools now are talking about taking away laptops and going back to pencil and paper, which is mind-boggling that people are thinking in such a strict way and trying to just restrict AI technology from the classroom because of how it's causing students to just not develop critical thinking skills and writing skills and losing their focus and attention span along with social media. So now we're going a step further and saying instead of just you prompting me and me giving you an output, the output being an essay or code, etc., I'm going to actually go and do the critical thinking and do all these tasks for you. So is this just going to be beneficial in academia? Is it going to be beneficial in education? Is it going to disrupt education further? Are you worried about this at all?
Well, I'm actually excited about this more than
Mhm,
worried about this. So I have a slightly contrarian view when it comes to education at large.
mhm,
Um, I think over the years we have transitioned our education systems from a system that encourages folks to think and reason to a lot of rote learning, right? And to a lot of standardized type of testing. Um, I think what that has done, for better or for worse, is that that whole rote learning and standardized testing has been conflated as education. Like that is what has become of it, right? And so in that universe, the problem is that that part of the puzzle, without the thinking aspects, without the organic, creative aspects, without new thing being thought through from first principles. Yes, of course, AI, and I'm saying why even AI? The even the presence of internet today kind of dissolves some of that or makes it questionable, right? And which is why even prior to these chat GPTs or AIs of the world, we have seen a lot of resistance around access to the internet during examinations, right? In fact, one manifestation of that happened during the pandemic when everybody was remote and obviously not sitting in classrooms and writing their exams, where there was an emergence of these locked browsers, right, that would not allow you to go outside or do anything else. Folks not realizing that those who wanted to cheat or get inspiration from the internet could very easily go to their mobile phone, which is sitting right next to them, right? So the
No
reality is
comment on
that,
that. No comment
right,
on that.
exactly. So, but the reality is that you should not approach that world from a standpoint of containing it or from a standpoint of limiting it, because it has the same problems that anything else in the world, not just this, but anything else in the world that you try to contain by, stricter regulations or by, whatever, clamping it down or making it illegal or, you know, um, completely disallowing it or having bans on it, right? Like this is one of the examples, like you mentioned, where schools are saying, hey, we'll just completely ban laptops. You can't even bring that in. You can just bring good old pencil and paper, and that's how we will teach. Well, sure, you can go that route, but my experience over the years teaches me that anything you try to ban, actually you help grow it further. So there's this, I'm a big believer in this Nicholas Nassim Taleb's theory of anti-fragile. You try to beat that down, it's actually going to become stronger. So I think like that's the case here as well. The more you would try to, not have students access to these pieces, I think the more you would inspire them to actually go after it, right? They would totally at that point in time feel like, no, we should find a way or a hack around this. And they will, right? There is always a hack for something. And then the funny thing is, it becomes more like an arms race, right? Like,
Mhm,
for example, you may have heard of this when, initial submissions were being made using ChatGPT. A lot of the examiners worried that this was straight up, copied text. So they started looking for ways to figure out whether it was generated by ChatGPT. And in fact, companies came up around it. I believe, if I have my facts right now, I remember correctly, there was in fact a university project that became a little bigger by a single student, I believe, in Princeton, and he wrote this thing called GPT-0, where you could run your text through that particular engine, and it would tell you if this was organically written by human being or was this done by GPT. And then while that happened, people were very thrilled and excited to say, oh, I found the stuff that I can catch people who are cheating via GPT. But lo and behold, few months later, there was a second one, I think, that was built, which was called GPT Hero, which you could take the output of GPT and run it through this, and now GPT-0 couldn't find it, right? And
mhm.
so it's the whole outsmarting of you build, you make a
Yeah.
new rule, you put a little, you know,
Cat and
guardrail
mouse.
around it, cat and mouse, they will
Yeah.
find a way, right? So I don't think it really accomplishes the purpose. You actually just, have people spend energy in the wrong direction.
So,
What I would
it,
what I would say, just as a point there, is that it's actually worthwhile for us to try and encourage folks to use it. And therefore,
Right.
I think we will move our emphasis from rote learning, standardized based thing to more organic understanding of the subject matter, to more, greater creativity, to asking the right questions more than just, learning up what has been written on the text. So.
So, I mean, it sets us up perfectly. Do you have any thoughts on how to empower students with ChatGPT and AI technologies instead of taking it away from them? How do we, I've been talking a lot about this, reformat education to be up to date with how students should think and should not think? It's not about memorization anymore. It's about adaptability and dynamic thinking.
Absolutely. So I feel like, see, in general, the smartness or education or understanding or accomplishment could be boiled down to this whole concept of, what you know, right? And most of the time, you can even simplify that down to a bunch of questions and answers. That, given a bunch of questions, are you able to answer it confidently? And I think those who are able to answer it confidently and accurately are supposed to be smarter, educated, accomplish as opposed to those who can't, right? And I think that we may need to go down to that very basic mechanism and flip it on its head, where I think we should focus now more on questions and less on answers. Like who can ask the right questions and the pertinent questions should be where I think the focus needs to be. Right. And so if you start really going back even into the Renaissance time or, the earlier inventions that we are taking advantage of today in our modern generation, they didn't really start with answers. In fact, those answers couldn't have existed because for a large period of time, we didn't even know what questions to ask, right? And that's when I think there is a lot of discovery, if you may, or exploration that started. You could also claim is probably the foundation for a lot of the modern universities and educational school systems, right? Like that's what kind of institutionalized a lot of those. And in most of those cases, it really came from asking the right questions, right? And the questions were really like, why do we see the night and the day? Like, why does it rain like this? Why is there a noise when that happens? Like very simple things, observation and questioning it. And, that quest for that stuff really led us to theories and led us to certain answers. And I think that the education system should be where, yes, you have access to everything. Go access the internet, go access the AI systems, go access more of an open book type of a theory, if you may, but ask the right questions, right? And in fact, I think in a way, in its own small way, the new conversational interfaces, if you may, kind of provide a little training ground for it. Because, as we all know, depending on your prompts, your response could be very different. If you have a really good prompt, you end up getting a really good pertinent response back. And when I say good means, relevant for that particular task. But if you have a prompt which is more hand wavy, or it's not well defined, or it's not something that is understandable by the machine, well, you're going to get some gibberish back, right? You're not going to get something that's useful. So the focus has moved towards asking the questions, not the answers. And I do feel that I think like that's what we need to promote. And that would then lead to a lot more, the why and, what is the idea behind it, and, the more one, not one, and bottoms up thinking. And I think we should definitely invest in that. We should encourage the next generation, and that needs to become part of education in modern life. In modern life.
What a brilliant answer. Thank you. Because this is the first time that someone has actually given something concrete for education to start reorienting around. It's not about, assimilating very, very antiquated knowledge and pushing that on students. I don't need to know, what happened in 1776. I can figure that out on my own. But what I should be thinking about and learning about is space mining, is biotechnology, genetic modification, nanotechnology, quantum computers. These are the relevant things. And in fact, what's happening, in parallel and simultaneously are people are being primed like they were with the iPhone
Hmm.
previously with AI technology, and they're also being primed, as you're saying, to ask questions and to learn how to ask questions.
Right.
So, that's an interesting development as well. So, talking about open source just for a second, are you worried about open source AIs getting into the wrong hands, or is the open source movement just beneficial outright?
Well, I think it will certainly get into some wrong hands as well. But I feel like, that's life. That's the reality. That's the universe we live in. Um, in a way, I would even step back and say that it would be tough even when it gets into the wrong hands, whether it's open source or through a large, corporate sort of driven initiative, whether it's right or wrong. And this may be a bit of a philosophical question and something to surmise over, but what guarantees that one of these, big, humongous corporate entities may not go rogue, assuming that there's disproportionate amounts of power that one can yield, if they have that particular technology within their control, right? Like, sure, you might say that government regulation or the ability of the masses within a democratic setup might hold them back, but that is not something that we know for sure. And also, even if it was built within a certain regulated or a managed type of a setup, the repercussions of that or the monetization of that leading to certain adverse or negative impact is also unknown at the point that it is built. And there's plenty of examples of that today in the universe. If you start thinking about it, the invention of a lot of technology has been applied for good things, and it has also been applied for malicious and bad intent, right? So I don't necessarily feel that a large corporate closed door versus open source is really the big choice, so to speak. In fact, on the contrary, I feel like open source is actually good because it's transparent, and
Mm.
it's equally available to both. It's equally available to the good side of the puzzle and to the adversary. And finally, I think what we'll end up seeing is whoever invests more time, energy, money in furthering the cause. So sure, if you may, all the good guys eventually give up or get distracted by something else, and everybody else who is has malicious intent actually takes the lead position and ends up innovating further and farther, and and then creates more havoc. Well, that would end up becoming our destiny, right? But this is more of a motivation, more of an inspiration for us to really do it in an open way and inspire the billions of people out there and let them all contribute, right? Like that's the beauty of open source. And I'm sure that the goodness will probably prevail, primarily because most people are interested in learning and doing interesting things and taking them to places and making life better for themselves and others, as opposed to necessarily harming everyone, right? So like it's a matter of making that accessible to more and more people, and that by itself will, I think, sort of flush that out, if you may, or create the equilibrium between the two. So that's what I think. I'm always a big proponent of keep it open, put it out there, let everybody innovate, let everybody get their hands on it, and that's perhaps the best way to kind of approach it.
Great, great. It's good to keep pessimists like me at bay. Um, one of the
We
things,
need both.
right, right, to keep us grounded. So let's talk about cybersecurity now. You run a
Mhm.
company called Uno.ai. It's at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. Is artificial intelligence kind of co-evolving with every technology it touches? And is the kind of hype around AI also hyping up information security? And what are some events in 2023 that are very pertinent and important to information security, and how will they affect 2024?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think there are two aspects of at the intersection of AI and cyber. One is AI for security, and the other one is security for AI.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is how can you use AI to make security better, right? Or worse, for that matter, right? Like even the malicious party could use it to create, malware or phishing attacks that could not be detected by current generation of tools. And I think there is some fear about that as well, right? That the malicious party getting their hands on it as much as the defenders have it. But certainly, I think there has been a lot of talk about it, and there is a lot of evolution as well over the last year. We started this whole concept of Copilot 2 years back before it was a word, before ChatGPT was around us. But we did see that in the post-ChatGPT era, the emergence of copilots has really taken off in the world of cybersecurity. I think that everybody is able to appreciate the concept of those, and everybody is also jumping on that to go build one, right? So there's certainly a lot of movement on AI for security on one side. And then on the other, there's also a substantial amount of fear that has been talked about. I don't think there has been a substantial big attack yet, at least publicly known. But certainly there has been a lot of talk about it. And the talk ranges all the way from, inadvertently sort of, leaking data. Like, hey, I'll take some of my proprietary information or confidential or business critical information. I might put it out there in the large language model one way or the other, and then therefore it's unrecoverable at that phase. So, there's definitely fear around it. There is certainly fear around, these sort of malwares or malicious attacks that AI will spawn, and it'll be difficult to detect, difficult to fight it. It could be done at scale easily, right? You don't need humans to even, create those. And then last but not the least is just the understanding of, how these systems would impact and, interact with the rest of the applications. And, does that really make it worse for information security at large? So, all these questions have been discussed and debated, and there's plenty of conversation going on around it. There is no two ways on that. Um, I do feel, again, being an optimist, being someone who's building a company in this space and is, very, very bullish on the promise of this space over the next, few decades. I do feel that I think information security at large would be, experiencing a very positive impact of the growth and emergence of modern generation AI. Um, you're going to see that at multiple levels. You're going to see that, of course, with better tooling, right? Because AI will help the tools become better. You will also help it bridge skill gaps. Today not everybody is at the same level of expertise, and this sort of having a co-pilot that does a lot of heavy lifting for you would bridge that gap, would enable even a newbie to kind of behave at the level of an expert, right? Which is what we would like everyone to do. We want smarter defenders, right? And then last but not the least, I think it will also enable in a lot of just understanding and usage of InfoSec, right? You would start seeing even things where it could be used for training, or it could be used for, large amount of information dissemination. These, conversational bots could become, quick and in place, in context helpers, right? Who can be reached out to even for end users and consumers, even when it comes to information security, because, and just like everything else, I think information security is not as well understood, right, as a domain. Not everybody understands it fully. Not everybody knows what to do at the right time. And I think like they've also become a big enabler. So, so that's the way I kind of think about this.
What, since being, a business leader, what do you look for in terms of hiring someone in to code AI, to be either a defender or something else in information security, or at the intersection? And how would someone in India, or in the region of Africa or in Latin America, get a job in this intersection, or at least get started in this intersection? What advice can you give to someone just who wants to be in a very relevant field going forward?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think, at the end of the day, it's again two parts. You have your good foundational knowledge. If you're a good, computer engineer, computer scientist, have the basics, then, you have the right foundational bit. So that is still required. That doesn't go away, especially if you're building a system, not using, but building a system. So certainly I would say like, continuing to do well on that space and, make sure that you have strong foundational understanding is a good thing. So continue to invest in that. Everybody should at all points in time. Not just theoretically, but also go build, right? There's just so much ability to build and deploy and get feedback on software that we don't even need organized institutions really at this point in time, right? You can throw your code out there in GitHub and somebody is going to use it, or you can go fix a bug in one of the existing projects, which is actually a good way, by the way, to get started. You can just look at a particular project that you care for, look at the issues and the ticket system in the open source world, and pick one up and solve it, and send in a pull request, right? And a lot of people then become part of that movement as a part of that small tiny effort that they make. But having said that, I think there is a second part of it which is equally important, and this is where open source also plays a very big part. Is there are numerous um, open source projects out there that are doing some outstanding work in the world of AI. I think first familiarize yourself with it. Go understand the concepts, go understand all the underlying pieces from the foundational old ML and AI techniques to where it's getting to, like for example, if you're deep in the language, natural language world, then definitely understand the encoder decoder models. What do they mean? Get a good grasp of neural networks, understand all the various ways which are computationally relevant when you're building or training a large language model. So definitely there is a ton of content out there and a lot of ways. There is not only the GitHubs of the open source world, but there is Hugging Face, which has a bunch of models out there, which one can take advantage of. Now, many venues like from Together AI to, few others have also made it very easy and accessible to get hold of GPUs and run it. There's Google Colab still out there that can be used for a lot of things quite gainfully. And so I would encourage a lot of these students around the world, not only India and Africa and elsewhere, but just about around the world to um, take advantage of it. It's out there, right? And it doesn't cost anything in most cases. It costs minimal amounts of money. You can easily, may take advantage of free tiers in many cases. And you can also, simply just learn from all the experts who are out there who are very willing to work with you and willing to help. And a lot of this is going on in Discord channels and Slack groups and open forums out there where people are discussing some incredibly interesting and innovative technologies and being very helpful. So go join the revolution.
Sure. Thank you. It's very important for young people and aspiring people to hear that, especially from someone like you with so much knowledge. Last question. You can answer it if you want to, but what did you think about the open AI drama?
Oh, entertaining.
Entertaining.
Yes. Uh, yeah, I mean, I kept pace with it for a bit and then I think I couldn't because there was just too much drama going on there.
Mhm.
Um, I do feel like I think, again, this is just me like everybody else, just watching it from far away.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like at one level it was unnecessary. This could have all been done, within closed doors, even if they had differences. This happens in many different corporate environments where there are differences and, strategy changes or, change of leadership or rethinking of that. And it can be done behind closed doors. I don't think the world necessarily needs to know. So I think there is that one part of me saying that, saying like, hey, why don't you just, take care of that internally? On the other level, I think this was one of those moments where, because again, Chat GPT has become so much in a common vocabulary that people were almost enjoying it, and social media was having its day.
Hmm.
Um, I think everyone was having fun around it with memes flying, speculations happening, and everybody putting their theories out there, and some even, um, sort of. Beginning to teach others, right? And this is not new, by the way. I mean, this is something just to kind of wrap that up here on this thought is it has happened in other cases as well. We saw that during the pandemic, everybody suddenly became a COVID expert. Then we saw when Silicon Valley Bank tumbled, everyone started talking about, FDIC insurance. And then, when OpenAI happened, everyone was trying to teach everybody how boards are run. So it's funny how the social media just devolves into an interesting space when any event like that happens. So again, going back to it, was certainly entertaining.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think my favorite theory was that Sam Altman was booted out because an AGI was starting to run OpenAI. So,
There
leave
you
it to
go.
the internet to make up the best theories. Shashank, this has been an incredible episode. Do you have anything to leave our viewers or listeners with? Any kind of points that we didn't touch on just before we go?
No, firstly, again, thank you for having me on the show a second time. I really appreciate it. I really had fun as well, and hopefully the audience do too. The only piece I would say before we close is this is the end of another year. Good time to reflect on all the good stuff you've done, things that you want to do, and go for it. Don't hold yourself back. 2024 is upon us. We've still got a little bit of 2023 remaining. Don't wait. All the good things that you're planning to do, well, do it today. Go for it right away.
Beautifully said. Shashank, where can we find you on social media or the internet in general?
Yeah, best place to find me is on LinkedIn with my handle T Shanky, or just search up my name, or perhaps you can drop that link somewhere in your
Absolutely.
place where you publish a podcast. You could also go to Uno.ai, the company that I have been spending all my energy on lately. Um, and then I do have the same T Shanky handle on Twitter as well, but I rarely am, or rather, I'm hardly active out there. But I think LinkedIn is where you definitely find me. And if there's any thoughts, questions, or any way that I could be helpful, do not hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to be of help if I can.
An absolute well of knowledge. Shashank, thank you so much. And happy holidays and New Year to everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Happy holiday, and thank you so much, Ayush.